Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen. We're here with comic Dan Wilbur. Dan Wilbur, how the hell are you?
I'm great.
Oh, good. Thank you so much for coming in. And where can people Where can people see you? Do stand-up comedy on stage in New York City, and where can they find you online?
Oh, they can find me at QED.
Yeah, so we're at QED in Astoria, Queens, and it sounds like you have your half hour coming up here.
Yes.
And when is that?
With Chloe Radcliff.
Wow.
That's on Leap Day. That's how you can remember it.
Is that February 29?
February 29.
Yeah. We booked that, and
I only get booked for a half hour once every 4 years. They say you can have Leap Day. That's
so
how you remember it.
I love that because then you have 4 years of time to write your material for half an hour. That's all you write in 4 years, right?
I would love to have a new half hour every 4 years.
Yeah.
I get a new 10 every once in a while, and I go, oh, that's a story. That's a thing. But then if I really try to punch it up, narrow it down,
and we'll have
that's more like 3 minutes. That's a 3-minute chunk.
And we'll have to explore. Maybe that's because you were recently engaged. But before we get into that, where can people find you? Are you Dan Wilbur across all social platforms?
Most platforms, it's at Dan Wilbur.
Okay.
My Venmo, my if you're trying to Venmo me, my Instagram is Dan Wilbur Comedy.
Okay.
There's a Dan Wilbur who's living just a fabulous life.
Is he really?
Oh, I check him out. He windsurfs and stuff.
Does he?
He's doing great.
Oh, but you're funnier.
Am I? I don't know him.
He's
so
unintentionally funny talking about kite surfing or windsurfing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm sure he's very funny.
Okay.
He's memorized many funny movies. Repeats that. I don't know him. It's a weird thing to talk shit about, especially since he has my name. So I can't actually talk shit about him. He's a nice guy.
Dude, yeah.
Met him many times. He's fabulous.
He's suspect. And then you got recently engaged.
Yes.
How long had you been batching? How long had you been a bachelor? As a comic, you must have been slaying for decades, right?
Oh my God. I was dating my girlfriend for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So pretty much since I moved to New York, I was with Anya and my fiance.
And so what took you so long?
What are you, my parents?
Yeah, well, here's your opportunity to tell me the real story, not the, I loved her so much, I had to figure out my love.
Yeah. Okay, so when you're really hungry, that's how I was trying to explain it to my niece, because she kept asking over Christmas.
Okay.
She's 30. No, she's a small child. She'll say, why weren't you married yet? Why weren't you married yet? I have a great tape of us talking about it. But I really
is it online?
Yes, it's on my Instagram.
Oh, that's comedy.
It is funny.
That's Dan Wilbur Comedy. That's not Dan Wilbur. That's Dan Wilbur Comedy right there.
I think it's really weird that people feed you the lie of like, you just know. You just know. When you know, you know. That's great. And I would say 50% of those marriages, just like 50% of every other marriage, ends in divorce. So there's like, oh, I guess you didn't know. You thought you knew. You didn't know. Oh, I just knew. I knew right at this moment or that moment.
I love that.
And for me, I was just, I hate to say it, I'm a little more cerebral than I'd like to be.
Okay.
I don't make a lot of knee-jerk statements, certainly.
On stage?
Yeah.
To comedic effect, good.
And on Twitter.com. I've gotten in trouble before. But when it came to my real life, I wanted to wait. And we had, I was just like, is this... My big fear, I'll tell you this, because this is a funnier version of what the hell I'm rambling about. My biggest fear was that we'd get married, we'd have all our friends and family show up, we'd show them what true love looks like, and then 2 years would go by, and we'd be like, actually, I don't like this. So everything was a lie, and and it'll feel like it's not true. Like every relationship, when it ends, you're like, it feels like that was a waste of time, when in fact it was good and it lasted as long as it was supposed to last.
Yeah.
So I had this big fear maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I was like, what if 2 years go by and I'm a completely different person? And the terrible news I found out is that did not happen. I am just the same person. I have not changed even a little bit.
So you could have done the same thing a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
I regret waiting.
Okay. So you overestimated your ability to change in 2 years.
Yes.
And why is that? Like, are you say you're cerebral, but you do kind of, you fly off the handle with respect to Twitter.com statements. What about that?
I feel like I gave you I misspoke. I gave you a knee-jerk assessment of myself that I just thought of. I'm a very. It's taken me a long time to meditation and through meditation and working out and walking around with my own thoughts instead of being plugged in and listening to comedians talk about serial killers. Isn't that an unhealthy thing?
Yeah.
You're like, I just want to take a nice walk through the park, and then you're like, I have to listen to last podcast.
Yeah, I was watching Making a Murderer for the 15th time before I came here.
I can't be bored in the place that I chose to walk. So a lot of me for the last, even like through college, I just was a big reader, and I went to college and studied Greek, and
that's well used today.
Really stupid idea. And even my approach to comedy was like, okay, I'm going to write a really good bit and elevate it and show people how good the writing is. And tons of people get away with that.
Yeah.
And then the more you think about it, the more you're like, no, people want to see you be present.
Yeah.
People want to see you. Like, I used to think crowd work was hacky. When in fact it's another tool in the toolbox.
To keep them paying attention.
You need to keep them paying attention. And because it's like, especially when you're on the road, you want to talk about what you saw and did because it's a place to write on stage. And then on top of that, they're gonna be more awake and more alert and paying attention. But also, like, if you came in and you were just reciting, which some comics do, George Carlin did it. As I once heard Christian Finnegan point out that Carlin was the only guy to just get on stage and be like, I wrote this, and then just say it all. Everybody else is like, oh, I'm just some asshole. I'm just thinking of this.
Yeah, and it takes him 5 seconds to write a new 30 minutes, not 4 years.
Right. So for me, I know that I have written material, but now I'll try to get on stage and just talk for a little bit at least.
And where you go when you had that realization, first of all, what led you to that realization, and then when you first had it, how difficult was it to start flexing that muscle or developing the muscle to stay in the moment and to stay present?
Well, I'm always been trying different things throughout the last. I've done comedy for like 14 years now.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, sometimes I get up and I say I don't have anything, so I'm just going to talk. So it's more like it's a little more negative than you're thinking. But recently, like the last couple years with therapy and getting my life in order, my friend Mike Kaplan has been very helpful.
Oh, cool.
His and John Fish, who has another podcast. I think there was a Mike Kaplan, John Fish crossover when Kaplan did Fish's podcast. And everything that he talked about, I gave it a whirl.
Okay.
So he talked about using, he talked about how he wrote and then like writing and walking at the same time and sort of inhabiting his body and talking to people. And
is this Mike Kaplan or John Fish?
Mike Kaplan.
Yeah. So we had
Fish and I are I think cut from the same cloth where we have a little more cerebral. I mean, Fish is in shape and stuff, but I think he does get in his own head and like all these things that Mike Kaplan does not suffer from.
Yeah, so he's he's a different animal from which we can all learn. Like when he was on here, I questioned him just for, the most important question I asked, and then he answered it wonderfully is, what the fuck is his writing process because he's so goddarn smart. And I think where we ended up is he uses several different, he kind of likened it to using several different neurons. He was like, well, I will talk into a recorder, I'll talk on stage, I'll write long form, and I'll also type into a computer. And he thinks that calls on kind of different neurons, and thus, that's kind of how his great bits get formed.
Yeah.
So it's just good advice. And so you were like, me and John Fish are cut from the same cloth. Mike Kaplan is a different animal. Let me ask him and see what the fuck he's doing.
Yeah. And Kaplan is, when you see him go up, it's something to be envied. And he used to just do sort of jokes per minute like that 10 years ago. Seemed planned out in a way, and now it's still his voice. I mean, he knew his voice before, but it's like if you see him, I'll hang out with him and like go to several shows, and he won't do the same set twice. He'll do there's similar bits, or like but he's really like, he's interacting with people. It's fun to watch Mike because he's interacting with himself.
Dude, he would interrupt himself with funnier and funnier things. Yes. Like the sentence would almost like, fold in on itself.
And in that way, he's like the ocean. You know what I mean?
His
the
glasses
waves,
got lost in the
waves
ocean,
keep
and he
coming,
did it.
and but they're all different, but all the same.
But I mean, but the reason why they want to see Dan Wilbur is because they saw Mike Kaplan last night, and they want to see something that's slightly different. And so, what kind of stuff are you talking about your engagement to Anya on stage, and what took you so long?
Yes, I talk about my anxieties about getting married. I talk about the engagement ring and all the rigmarole you have to go through, because I think this is true of everyone who gets married, is they go, we're not going to do any of that bullshit. And then
especially a comic.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're doing like at least 3 or 4 bullshit things. You know what I mean? Like we're not doing all of it, but we're doing some of it, and
because some of it has a purpose.
Well, I would hope that you would feed your guests. You know what I mean? Like, I've been to weddings where there was an open bar and free food, and it was just, I left engorged and had to be rolled out. And I've been to weddings where someone brought a potato salad and it was a cash bar, and we were all like, what is this?
This sucks, right? I hate the couple now. Except
that one, the cash bar, they had a formal in the church wedding that was like 45 minutes. And I'm like, you can't do the formal wedding and then the bullshit reception. You gotta choose.
Yeah.
So then I've been to like really fun weddings where, they played the Darth Vader theme as they, as the bride came down the aisle.
That's
and then
cool.
They had it in like a music venue. I've gone to bars and seen my friend Sean Crespo and Carol got married in a bar, and then they served Criff dogs.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great.
What the hell are Criff dogs?
Come on.
Yeah, dude, I'm
Come
serious.
on.
I'm stuck here in the basement, man. I don't got
It's on St. Mark's.
Okay.
They just make really complicated hot dogs.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure that people
just deluxe ass hot dogs that are $20.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And that leads me to money, which is my big question, which is just what I've always wanted to ask you for the last 10 years.
Oh boy.
When you're about to get married to Anya and you have to get her that big rock, to put on her finger, that 2 months, what's the rule? 2 months salary? For a comedian, that's a pretty big diamond.
Yeah, it was a negative. She had to give me a few rocks. It was negative rocks.
And then
what I gave her.
So to get you out of your head, you're doing some reading, and you consider books on tape to be reading.
I guess. Jeez, when you put it that way, this is what I think.
Okay.
I hate books on tape, and yet occasionally I've read aloud from Moby Dick, and I thought, this is so much. I know he just wrote it with a pen, but it sounds so much better out loud.
Yeah.
And I think that, or like, anytime an actor's actually giving an interpretation, especially of a role they played. So I have Lolita on tape by Jeremy Irons, maybe one of the best audiobooks of all time.
And Dominique Swain was also in that movie. Was she also on the audiobook? Like they weren't saying their lines. He was just doing the whole thing.
He does the girl voice. It's really
Is he really doing voices on there?
Oh yeah. Wow. Oh yeah. He's a very talented actor.
Oh sure.
The best Die Hard villain.
But the girl voice, I would think it would be beyond his capacity. Nothing's beyond Jeremy.
Well, because it sounds like he's patronizing. It sounds like because the whole point is that he's built her up in this way that he's doing an impersonation that's not mean, but it's also childish, and he knows it, and it's like it's an interpretation of the book.
Wow!
If you're reading the book, you're just getting It's not even condescending. It's he's aware that of what she sounds like, even though he still loves her.
I love that. Well, she's still hot. Dominique Swain.
Oh boy. Well, I don't want to talk about the hotness of the child.
Well, I'm hoping she was of age at that time. But
I would assume she was.
Yeah, she was younger than Jeremy Irons, of course.
Yes.
Okay, and then when they see you do stand-up...
the premise of the book. I'm sorry. I just like books on tape that are either... Like, if it's a massive undertaking, I'd also like it on tape, but I think
because it was Moby Dick. You've done Moby Dick a couple times, and that's just 1,000. That's a long ass book.
But I've read Moby Dick sitting and just staring at it,
and it's awful.
And
right?
when
you're sitting
weird.
staring at it, right?
Well, it's just a weird book.
Okay.
It's so like there's passages that are like just like Jonah and the whale, this biblical tale of me going and it all rhymes and it's fun and there's like assonance and it's fun to say out loud. And then there'll just be a chapter about like I went to this place. And they had really good chowder. And that's the whole chapter. Yeah, it's like, oh, this lady was weird.
Yeah, Stephen King writes about, you're reading a great gripping, suspense novel by Stephen King, and then it's 20 pages of some dude on a porch. And you're like, thanks, Stephen King, let me wait for the movie.
Right. It's Melville's funnier than Stephen King.
Oh, good.
For sure.
Good.
Like, he's just a funnier, weirder person. And there's jokes in it, and he's like, there's this brash lady that cooks the chowder, and she put up a sign that said no suicides or smoking. And you're like, what the hell? It's like still funny.
Okay.
But then when he talks about, it's more that when he got so obsessed with whaling that he decided to tell you wrong theories, wrong Darwinian understandings.
And you could do that as a stand-up comic on stage, but it's less responsible as somebody who's trying to present it as a serious discussion of whaling.
Well, it's less responsible as the world catches fire to just not understand science or even try. I think it's painfully irresponsible. And I know lots of great comics who get up and go, I don't know. But that's almost fine versus someone getting up and being like, I don't believe in climate change, which is something that Carlin said. Look it up. He said, but maybe funnier, he said that these hippies are just trying to make a nice place for themselves, and it's actually narcissistic. It's actually a very interesting point.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, you're really going to recycle. Because that's my Carlin impression.
And he'll be doing his Carlin impression at QED, hopefully, which is Leap Day, which is February 29th.
Yeah.
And then who else is on the show, you said?
Chloe Radcliffe, Daphne Genkler.
Okay. Oh, sure. I think we were supposed to have her on yesterday, sure.
Oh, cool.
And hopefully we'll have her on in the future.
Did she ditch it? I'll give her a talking to.
Okay, well, please do. And then Dan Wilbur, when they want to find you online, you're Dan Wilbur across several social platforms, but not Instagram because you're Dan Wilbur Comedy, because there's some chump out there who's kite surfing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Dan Wilbur, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brian.